I had been offshore for 6 weeks when the platform supervisor told me I could go home early. There had been a mechanical issue with one of the drills. Non-critical, they said, but it meant a crew rotation ahead of schedule. Normally I would have pushed back, asked to stay on and bank the extra pay. That's what I always did. 6 years working the rigs off the coast of Nova Scotia, and I'd learned to treat every extra day as money in the jar for my daughter's future. But that morning, I just said yes. I don't know why. I've thought about it 100 times since. There was no voice, no sign, nothing dramatic like that. I was just tired in a way that sleep didn't fix anymore, and I wanted to see my daughter's face before another week turned into another month. So I said yes. I packed my bag and I took the helicopter to the mainland. I called my wife from the airport in Halifax. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted her that I was coming home and got nothing back for almost 2 hours, and when she finally replied, it was just, okay, one word, lowercase. I told myself she was busy. She worked dispatch for a transport company, long shifts, lots of noise. I told myself a lot of things on that drive home. My daughter Petra was 9 years old that summer. She had her mother's stubbornness and my inability to ask for help, which is a combination that makes for a kid who seems completely fine right up until she isn't. She'd been struggling a bit in school the previous year. Nothing serious, her teacher said. Just some trouble focusing, getting frustrated easily. My wife had found a program, a residential summer program in the Laurentians, up in the hills north of Montreal. She'd shown me the brochure on a video call back in May. Horizon Ridge Academy, it said, where children discover resilience, purpose, and connection with the natural world. The photos look like a postcard. Kids in red jackets hiking through birch trees, a log dining hall with big windows, smiling counselors with lanyards. It had a website, a registration process, testimonials from parents in Laval and Longueuil who said things like, "My son came home a different child, and she finally learned what she was capable of." I asked how much. My wife told me. It was expensive. Nearly $4,000 for 8 weeks. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I'd been away a lot that spring. I knew I had. So I said okay. I sent the e-transfer from my phone on a Tuesday night while sitting in the crew quarters trying to hear her voice over the satellite connection cutting in and out. Petra didn't want to go. She told me that on our last video call before she left. She said she didn't know anyone there and that she'd rather just stay home. I told her it would be good for her. I told her she'd make friends. I told her it was only 8 weeks and I'd be back before she knew it. She looked at me through the screen for a second after that, not upset exactly, just quiet. Then she said, "Okay, Dad," in that small voice she used when she was trying not to disappoint me. I think about that look a lot. My wife's car was in the driveway when I got home. I knocked. I still had a key, but something made me knock. She opened the door and looked at me the way you look at something you were expecting eventually but hoped would take longer to arrive. The conversation that followed is its own story and not the one I'm telling here. What matters is this. Partway through it, I realized Petra had been at that program for 5 weeks already and my wife hadn't visited once. I hadn't either, I know. I was offshore. But she'd been 20 minutes outside of Saint Jerome for 5 weeks and her mother had driven past the exit to get to the casino in Kanawake at least 3 times in that same stretch. That part came out slowly, like water through a bad seal. It wasn't the first time. I'd known it wasn't the first time for a while. I asked about Petra. My wife said she was fine. The program didn't allow weekly calls. It was part of the process. It helped the kids develop independence. She showed me the intake paperwork we both signed. There it was, in small type. Communication with family is limited to written correspondence during the first 6 weeks to allow campers to fully engage with the program. I asked if Petra had written. My wife went quiet for a moment. Then she said there had been a few letters, but she'd been meaning to read them properly and respond. She'd just been busy. She'd been meaning to read them. I found them in a kitchen drawer. 3 letters, still in their envelopes, postmarked across 3 different weeks. I opened the first one right there at the kitchen table. Dear Dad, I hope you are on the rig and not somewhere you can't read this. I don't like it here. They wake us up very early and we have to do work before breakfast. I asked when I could call you and they said not until week 7. Can you come get me? I will be good, I promise. Love, Petra. The second one, Dear Dad, my hands hurt. We carry wood for a long time. I cried and a counselor said I was being dramatic. I don't think I am being dramatic. I think something is wrong here. There is a boy in our group who got sick and they made him keep working. Please come. I miss you so much. The third one, dated 9 days before I got home. Dear Dad, I think you are mad at me. That's okay. I understand. But please come anyway. I sat at that table for probably 3 minutes. Then I stood up, took my bag, which I had not even fully unpacked, and I walked back to my truck. Horizon Ridge Academy was 4 hours north. I drove it in 3.5. I remember almost nothing of that drive except that at some point it started to rain and I didn't turn the wipers on fast enough and I couldn't see and I had to pull over on the shoulder for about 45 seconds because my hands were shaking too badly to steer. I sat there in the rain. I thought about the line, my hands hurt. I thought about the line, I think you are mad at me. Then I pulled back onto the highway. The property was set back from a gravel road behind a gate with the Horizon Ridge logo on it in green metal letters. The gate was open. I drove through. It was early morning. I'd left Halifax in the afternoon, drove through the night, and the sun had just come up behind the tree line. I saw her before I even got out of the truck. She was at the edge of a cleared area near what looked like a storage shed. She was carrying wood. Not a few pieces. She had an armful stacked up to her chin, and she was walking slowly because of the weight, her shoulders hunched forward. She was wearing the same red jacket from the brochure, but it was dirty now, the cuffs dark with something I didn't want to think about. She was 9 years old. It was 6 in the morning. She was hauling firewood in the rain. I got out of the truck without closing the door. She heard it and looked up, and I saw her face go through about 6 different things in the space of 2 seconds. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that cracked open, something that had been holding itself shut for 5 weeks. She dropped the wood. She ran. I don't have the words for that moment. I don't think they exist in any language I speak. I just caught her and held on. She was lighter than she should have been. I noticed that immediately. I'm her father. I know what she feels like when I pick her up. She was lighter, and when I held her hands to look at her face, I saw her palms. The skin was cracked. There were calluses forming on a 9-year-old's hands. Dad, she said, they said you knew. They said you signed the papers and you knew it was going to be like this. I couldn't speak for a second. They said you thought it would be good for me, she said. To learn to work hard. Petra, I said. Baby. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I have to put the wood back or I'll get in trouble. She said it so matter-of-factly, like that was just how things worked now. I said, you are not putting the wood back. You're coming with me. She glanced toward the main building. They'll be upset. That's okay, I said. Let them be upset. She nodded very seriously, like we'd made a deal. Then she said, Dad, there's a boy. His name is Felix. He's 8. They locked him in the equipment room last night because he refused to do evening chores. He's been in there since dinner. I found the director of Horizon Ridge Academy in the main lodge, pouring himself a coffee. His name was printed on a laminated badge on his chest, Stuart Blaine, and he was probably 60, big man, the kind who fills a door frame and knows it. He saw Petra first, then me, and his expression went from confused to controlled very quickly. He told me I couldn't be here, that I hadn't arranged a proper pickup, that there was a procedure, that the program ran on structure and unscheduled family arrivals disrupted the therapeutic process. I said, my daughter is 9 years old. She has been hauling firewood since before sunrise. Her hands are cracked. She's lost weight. I'm taking her. He said the physical work was part of the program, building resilience. The children learned responsibility through contribution. It was all in the documentation I'd signed. I said, "Where's the boy named Felix?" Something moved across his face. It was fast, and he covered it. But I'd spent 6 years working with men who hid things, and I knew what it looked like. He said he didn't know what I was referring to. I said, "My daughter says there's an 8-year-old locked in your equipment room since last night. If you tell me that's not true, I'm going to walk every building on this property until I find out for myself. And if I find him, the next call I make won't be to you." He told me I was trespassing, that he had relationships with the local Sûreté du Québec, and he wouldn't hesitate to involve them. I said, "Please do. Call them right now. I'll wait." He didn't call anyone. I found Felix in a storage room attached to the equipment shed. He was curled on a folded tarp in the corner, still in his work clothes from the day before. He was 8 years old. He looked at me with the flat, careful eyes of a child who has learned to be very still around adults. I said, "Hey, I'm Petra's dad. I'm gonna get you out of here." He said, "Are you allowed to do that?" I said, "Yes." I called 911 from the parking lot with Petra on one side of me and Felix on the other. The dispatcher connected me to Sûreté du Québec, and 2 cruisers arrived within 25 minutes. While we waited, I called a family law lawyer I knew from a case years ago, woke him up, and described the situation. He told me to document everything I could see before anything got moved. I walked the property. I took photographs on my phone. The sleeping quarters, bunkhouses that slept 12 kids each, no heating source other than a wood stove. The daily work schedule posted on the inside of the dining hall door, printed and laminated, wake up at 5:15 a.m., chores from 5:30 to 7,007 before breakfast. More physical labor from 900 to noon, afternoon sessions from 2 to 5:30. The sessions listed things like character building and accountability work, a camp for children, $4,000 a child. There were 11 children at the camp that summer. 5 of them had calloused hands. 3 had lost noticeable weight. One 11-year-old girl had a burn on her forearm from what another child told the officers later was a hot ash incident that had been dismissed as minor without any medical attention. Stuart Blaine was arrested that morning. His business partner, a woman named Bridget, whose last name I still can't say without my jaw tightening, was arrested 2 days later in Terrebonne. The investigation took 8 months. The Sûreté found that Horizon Ridge Academy had been operating without a valid provincial license for residential youth facilities. The testimonials on the website were fabricated. The intake documents, the ones that I and 11 other families had signed, contained language buried in the third appendix that authorized structured labor contributions as part of the therapeutic model. The average parent reading time for a summer camp contract is about 4 minutes. I know, because that's roughly how long I gave it on a video call from a rig off the Atlantic coast. Blaine was charged with forcible confinement of a minor, failure to provide necessities of life, and fraud over $5,000. Bridget faced similar charges. Both were convicted. Blaine was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. The fraud charges added restitution payments to every family. I'm not going to pretend the money mattered much by then. Petra started grade 4 that September. Her teacher told me in October that she was one of the most quietly determined kids she'd ever seen, that she'd finish her work first and then sit and wait for everyone else without making a sound, like she'd learned that patience was survival. It took a long time before she stopped doing that. Before she remembered that being done early meant you could just relax. Her hands healed. That was the first thing. The calluses softened over a few weeks. She stopped flinching when I reached for her hands to cross a street. She still sometimes wakes up early. Not 5 a.m., but earlier than a kid should. Some mornings I'll come downstairs at 7 and find her sitting at the kitchen table already dressed, waiting. I'll make her toast and we'll sit together and she'll tell me whatever she wants to tell me, and I let her lead. Some days it's about her friends. Some days she wants to talk about Felix, who she still knows. His family sent us a card that Christmas, and we've stayed in touch the way you do with people who were in the same storm. Some days she doesn't say anything. She just eats her toast and watches the backyard through the window, and that's fine too. She asked me once, maybe 6 months after everything happened, whether I felt bad that I signed the paperwork without reading it all the way through. I said yes. I said I felt bad about a lot of things. I said I should have been home more, and I should have called more, and I should have read every single page. She thought about that. Then she said, "But you came back early." I said yes. She said, "That's the part that mattered." I think she was right, but I also think, and I've said this to other parents since, parents who've asked me how something like this happens, how you let your child end up somewhere like that. I think the part that matters before you come back is the part where you read the contract, where you call the facility, where you drive up unannounced before you sign anything, and you look the director in the eye and you ask him to show you, not just tell you, what a regular Tuesday looks like. Because they can fake a website, they can fake a brochure, they can fake testimonials and badge lanyards and a beautiful aerial photograph taken in October when the leaves are turning and the place looks like something out of a magazine. They cannot fake a child's face when her father drives through the gate at 6 in the morning. That part is always real.